forum and asking officers to take a knee. At one point we were hearing witnesses say that they said if an officer would take a knee, they would leave, but then apparently one or two officers may have done so, and still the crowd remains. The crowd has thinned considerably. It's sort of it's a stalemate right now. No one wants to give. Police are very calmly just holding their ground, standing there, not really doing much of anything, and the protesters are making their point and not advancing much at this point. So everyone's just sort of in position, and it's been this way for quite a while.
It has, for a couple of hours now. We saw one situation where it appeared that a water bottle was thrown at police. At that point, they sent off some flashbangs, which sent off a bunch of light, a flashing light, kind of like fireworks, it looks like. And that's it. So there's only been really that one interaction, different from last night when we saw police deploy tear gas multiple times. So this one is more peaceful. There's no attacks on police so far.
They are, the protesters are in a large group in an area where they've been told to disperse, and they have not done so. So technically, police consider them to be in violation of the law, but police are not doing anything in direct response to that right now, which is a patient move to hopefully just to end this quietly and peacefully and calmly, and in the hope that everyone will eventually just go home. That's what they've been asked to do.
We've only seen, and we apologize for some of the raw language that's coming over air right now. Of course, this is a fluid situation. We can't control that and the emotions that are out there. We've only seen one person taken into custody tonight, right outside the front of the Police Operations Center. And that's our latest that we know. Nothing has changed since then. But the protests are certainly not leaving. It's midnight tonight in Colorado Springs.
As Sunday moves into Monday, this goes on the way it has been for quite some time. And there's no sign that many of these protesters are thinking about leaving at this point. And the police, well, they're patient. This is their job. I guess you could say they've got all night.
Yep.
The new shift may come in, or maybe they may be earning overtime for being here. But from their point of view, there's no aggression on their part. They've stood their ground in front of their own operations center for several hours now. They put up concrete barriers before any of this even started today in anticipation of the crowd arriving here as it did last night. But it has arrived with much less force and aggression than it did last night, and much less resistance from police, because so far, you hesitate to call this peaceful because they're making noise, and some people have said, how is this peaceful? Well, it's peaceful in that there are no clashes, no violence,
right, no violence.
Fighting, nothing being thrown, no one being hurt.
Colorado Springs Fire Department told me that they did treat multiple people for different injuries, but none of them serious last night. So that was some good news, especially when we saw people running and going back and forth as tear gas went out. Definitely some of our reporters hit with the tear gas and stinging eyes, stinging throats, but that being the worst of it.
As far as we know, there's been no deployment of tear gas tonight by Colorado Springs police, and that's a vast improvement over last night. That's a good thing to take away from this. And as far as we know, we saw one person being taken away, detained or arrested. We're not sure. We don't know of any others at this point. And we also don't know of any injuries that have happened anywhere along the route back and forth that these protesters have taken between City Hall via Acacia Park to the Police Operations Center and back and forth a few times today. It is all settled in here now. One group in one spot waiting it out. Police and protesters both patiently waiting for something to change, and there's no sign that anything's going to anytime soon.
And that riot gear is heavy, Don. If those officers were to kneel, it would take them quite a while and put them in a really vulnerable position in order to get up. That's what Springs Police are telling our crews out in the field. So
makes sense, yeah.
The riot gear is heavy. It's going to put them in danger if they were to kneel. And
the police department and the city leaders have told us all along that many of the men and women in uniform right now agree with the fact that something awful happened in Minneapolis a week ago, and that George Floyd should not have died.
Our own police chief is sending out a statement talking about that earlier tonight.
And they agree to the right to peaceful protest, the First Amendment in this country, protected by the Constitution. They agree that a peaceful protest is one of our great rights as American citizens. The problem they have is when it veers beyond peaceful into violent and destructive, as it was a little bit last night in Colorado Springs, and to a much greater extent in other cities up in Denver and across the nation.
The police chief saying tonight he is saddened. He's saddened by Mr. Floyd's death. He said every life is precious. He said he's saddened watching videos of communities being burned in protests, as violence is never the answer. And lastly, he says he's saddened to see trust in law enforcement diminish, as the actions of a few do not represent us all.
And even the organizers of this very protest have told our crews today that they don't want it to deteriorate into something that becomes destructive and violent, and that vandalism happens and fires are set. They don't want that to happen. It's counterproductive to the point they're trying to make, counterproductive to the community they're trying to protect. But sometimes it happens because a few instigators get carried away, and so far it has not happened to a great extent tonight, and that's encouraging to see as we move into hour 14 of when things officially got started today, about 10 o'clock this morning.
And I know our dear law enforcement families watching our coverage are worried about their loved ones, the men and women in blue, protecting our community tonight. So we're happy to report doesn't appear to be any injuries or direct attacks on police, except for one water bottle thrown that we could see from this video in the police operations center right outside that.
Is that a loudspeaker announcement again? Let's listen for just a moment. Apologize that inappropriate language is. We apologize that inappropriate language has made it onto our air via this live feed from the stalemate right now between protesters and police. We don't intend for that to happen, but sometimes it does. So our apologies about that.
Springs Police Department. I do hereby declare this an unlawful assembly, and in the name of the people of the state of Colorado, I command you to immediately disperse. This is Lieutenant Kern, a lieutenant with the Colorado Springs Police Department. I do hereby declare this an unlawful assembly, and in the name of the people of the state of Colorado, I command you to immediately disperse. Gentlemen, please leave. We do not want to arrest anybody, but it's getting unsafe. That was not our fire. It is unsafe. Please leave. We don't want anybody to get hurt. Please leave. It's not safe out here. Please leave. We don't want anybody to get hurt. safe. Possibly was a gunshot from the west. Please leave. Guys, we don't want this. It's dangerous out here. Please leave.
You could have taken a knee an hour ago. Come on. Be with us here. They just took away that contrast.
Please leave. It's not safe. Please respect your organizers. It is dangerous out here. Please leave. Please back off. It is not safe behind you. Please go north.
We were peaceful. We were saying that.
Please leave. It is not safe out here.
Strike them! Strike them!
Please.
Strike
There are
them!
more officers coming in the area. It is not safe. We're asking you to go home for your safety.
How is that safe? You fucking crazy! Homes either! We ain't never been safe with you fuck! Come on!
Please. It is not safe. Please leave for your safety.
That was a gunshot. That wasn't no fucking firework. Yep. Oh shit, here they come.
Okay, as you're watching right now, our live coverage in downtown Colorado Springs, things escalating quite a bit here tonight. Police have been able to move the protesters away from the front of the police operations center to the concrete barricaded line And Don, it got really scary for a minute because it sounded like some gunshots went off, or at least one.
This is the most significant escalation we've seen all evening long. And when we heard that sound that sounded like a gunshot, we heard the lieutenant on the loudspeaker say, "That was not us. That was not our fire." He's telling this crowd now it is not safe here. Go home because they believe someone may be firing. I'm going to be quiet. We'll listen to the lieutenant now. All right, he's not speaking again. I thought he was.
He came over, he said, please leave. It's not safe. Respect your organizers.
The organizers have said they do not want this to drag out into this. They thought their rally itself was over hours ago and they wanted everyone to leave, and some have stayed. And so for a while there, it's pretty scary. And there you see now that the protesters who have been the ones that aren't leaving are they've just moved back maybe 50 yards. Here's the lieutenant again.
Lieutenant with the Colorado Springs Police Department. I do hereby declare this an unlawful assembly, and in the name of the people of the state of Colorado, I command you to immediately disperse. This is Lieutenant Kern, a lieutenant with the Colorado Springs Police Department. I do hereby declare this an unlawful assembly, and in the name of the people of the state of Colorado, I command you to immediately disperse.
There we've heard the command issued once again by the Colorado Springs Police Department. As we've heard all night, this is an illegal assembly as far as they're concerned. Everyone ordered to leave, to disperse, to go home. And here comes tear gas.
Please leave. It is no longer safe. This is a warning. That was not chemical gas. Please leave. Clear the intersection or you will be arrested. Please leave.
I believe the lieutenant said that was not tear gas, it was a warning. It was just a smoke device of some kind. But here come the police now, advancing into the intersection. The warning has gone out that these people will be arrested, and now that is probably what we're going to see happening here.
They've now blocked that entire intersection as they've been able to move forward. We did see at one point some of the protesters kicking
The gas canisters.
the gas canisters back at Colorado Springs Police.
But again, I believe the lieutenant said that was not a chemical irritant, that it was just a smoke thing as a warning. I believe that's what he said.
Well, it definitely moved people away for now.
It did.
As we've seen, though, over the past 48 hours, they come back.
This is the first time we've seen the police in a move this aggressive. They had been standing put, holding their ground behind their shields, and now they have moved toward the crowd for the first time really this evening.
Yes.
And we see maybe some arrests being made there. What changed is that there was what sounded like a gunshot, and the police lieutenant told the crowd that was not us. Their fear being that someone in the crowd somewhere had perhaps fired off a weapon, and at which point it became extremely unsafe for anyone on either side to still remain in this position. That's when things changed. That's when, with their heavier vehicles there, the police have begun to move forward.
Well, we also see other agencies involved in this. You can see Teller County, one of their, it looks like their tactical vehicles, the Teller County Sheriff vehicle
Right.
also here helping to assist Colorado Springs Police.
The crowd that was there seems to have moved on. We don't know if they're still assembled farther up the road or if they've started to scatter now, really for their own safety, Diane, because once a possible gunshot is heard and police have said, we're not doing that,
Yeah.
then someone else is, and no one knows where they are or what they've got in mind.
Well, it's surprising how many people didn't run from that, really, if it was indeed a gunshot.
Which it may not have been. Let's listen to the lieutenant again. those heavily armored vehicles now moving into the area where the crowd ran to. They've got other parts of the intersection shut down, and they warned them, fair warning, if you remain in this intersection, you will be arrested. This is not a lawful assembly. And that's a declaration they made by Colorado law. And so now they are presumably going to, if anyone remains, going to make those arrests.
Well, we certainly can see the protesters on the other side of police. They still have now an apparent barricade with their vehicles up, possibly a way to transport people in custody. They're moving those down Nevada right now.
Right, and it may well be that most of the crowd, what remains of it, has moved as a group farther away from the police operations center. And that's the El Paso County Sheriff's command vehicle, I think. So our camera position now is, if there are confrontations happening, they're beyond those vehicles. I would imagine, Diane, that part of the crowd has probably dispersed and said, I've had enough, I'm going. I don't know what it takes. If you're down there right now in what has been declared an unlawful assembly, you've been threatened with arrest, you've been threatened with tear gas, although we believe that the smoke device was a warning before the chemical irritant was deployed. So we don't know that any has been used. And you've got police with their riot shields making their way down the street looking for anyone who is refusing to leave.
Our crew's obviously trying to zoom in a little bit more so we can get some perspective on just how many protesters are still out there. But police certainly taking over that intersection at Nevada and Rio Grande. They've had concrete barriers out there all day, blocking the front of the police operations center, now out in force with their own bodies, blocking the street there as well. It's a dangerous thing they do every day, Don, and they're willing to do it.
Right. It's a difficult job, and it takes courage to do it. And also to be mindful of the fact that people have their right to express their opinion, to express their anger and sadness over what happened a week ago in Minneapolis. But at the same time, they have to follow the applicable laws when it comes to a protest. And police seemed like they were being very patient and very restrained tonight until it reached a point where it was determined that this could turn very quickly very dangerous.
Well, they stood there with the riot gear on for several hours tonight as we brought that to you live here on air on 11 News at 10 and now as we continue our coverage.
So the method now seems to be to get the SUVs in behind the heavily armored vehicles and try to just slowly move up Nevada Avenue to where the crowd may or may not still be assembled and try to do what they can to make sure that those who are still there just leave the area.
Definitely a different scene than we saw just 20 minutes ago, Don. No protesters in that intersection anymore. No protesters appearing to be outside of the police operations center as the police move in with some heavily armored vehicles from the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, also the Teller County Sheriff's Office, and the rest of them as they move northward down Nevada now. And
as that rolling blockade makes its way up the avenue, they're not giving the protesters a spot to converge and a spot to regroup. So the strategy seems to be keep them on the move and disperse them as a crowd because they simply don't have a place to stop and regroup. And the technology we have allows our camera crew to maintain this live signal even on the move. And so they're able to do that slowly and very mindful of their own safety. And we want to emphasize this again. Our crews know full well that they alone make the decision in the field as to whether they want to stay where they are, and they have the perfect ability to move and get themselves to safety at any time they feel that's necessary.
It looks like most of them are congregated now. I can't tell if it's police or protesters or a combination of both outside of that car wash in Nevada. Mm-hmm. There's also an antique store, I think, right across the street from that.
It looks like that's what we're seeing is the police line, and it's hard to tell what's beyond that. That was a real scare, I think, for everyone involved for a few minutes there, Diane.
We heard what it sounded like a gunshot. Police coming over their intercom saying that was not us. We don't know what it was. We don't know where it came from. Them quickly moving in, pushing the protesters out of the intersection, out of the street. Now most of the line is at the car wash on Nevada that's just north of the police operations center.
And they're advancing to the north, and so any remaining protesters, if they're in a group, it's hard for them to maintain that that sense of being gathered in a cluster. They're having to disperse now non-voluntarily, but that was the goal of the police all along, to get this crowd to thin out and go home, or go somewhere else anyway, and be less of a crowd, therefore less of a threat. The crowd would argue that they weren't a threat in any way, that they were being calm and peaceful and expressing their opinions, but the police made the point that this was declared an unlawful gathering by whatever law they were using to determine that, and so at that point it became time for them to make this move to clear that crowd out.
There's dozens of them there now, and their riot gear at least 2 or 3 rows deep at this point, of officers from Colorado Springs Police with their vehicles ahead of them.
This clearly was the action plan that was in place all along, the hope being they wouldn't need to deploy it, but this is orchestrated, Diane, so they've clearly had a strategy all day long, and they have to. It's the job to know, what do we do if this happens, what do we do if that happens. This is the plan that seems to be fanning out in wide numbers on the part of the police to disperse what is left of the crowd. And it was down to maybe 100 or fewer,
Yes.
having been several hundred earlier in the day. And this seems to be, well, they've cleared them out from the area of the police operations center. What's happening to the north there is difficult to see. Our crew can only be in, a certain number of places at a time. Is that perhaps an arrest happening there? They warned them. They said, if you remain, you will be arrested, and that's what's happening now. All right, it looks like the convoy of police vehicles has stopped a block or two north of Rio Grande on Nevada, on South Nevada there, just south of the main heart of downtown Colorado Springs.
I think they're right in front of the 7-Eleven now, Don.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. Almost to Cimarron then.
Yes. There's the
There's
sign.
the 7-Eleven,
yeah.
yeah. Well, that's not necessarily how we expected this to go in the last half hour or so.
No.
When we came on live just before midnight tonight. As the program Elementary ended, we thought, well, let's go back on, do an update, see what the status is, see if there's any change in this ongoing stalemate. And within a few minutes, yes, indeed, there was a change, a significant one, as it became apparent that the situation had gotten too dangerous to just leave everyone in place. Police decided it was time to make their move to try to do what they could to get everyone to just disperse the crowd that had been gathered for hours.
The police warned them that that was a really dangerous spot to be in, that they couldn't see what was behind them, that they needed to move, and then made their move past those concrete barriers they set up right at Rio Grande in Nevada, and then pushed everyone north into downtown Colorado Springs.
And at the same time, I think we saw a couple of the large police vehicles coming south toward the crowd. So
Yes.
they couldn't simply advance, the crowd couldn't simply advance north. They had to split up.
Yeah, we see the officers on both sides of the street now.
Yeah, so it was an interesting play that they made, clearly the strategy that had been planned out. And it's hard for us to tell if there are many or any protesters still in the area because the camera can only see so far in the limited light. But our crew has been slowly making its way north, but at the same time going to the trouble to bring us the live feed and the live signal as well. So we appreciate the hard work all of our crews have been doing the last couple of days as they look back now at the spot where the police, right at the car wash there, are the sort of the last line now before the POC. That could have been
Really bad.
Really
And
bad.
I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
We can say we didn't see anyone get injured.
right.
Of course, we're only able to tell you what we're seeing live on TV and from our crews at the scene, but it doesn't appear anyone was injured in that immediate area. We didn't see any ambulances move in.
Right, and let's hope that remains the case. as there are certain to be certain elements of this crowd, a block or two even north of where we can see there from our camera perspective, there may be some who are holding on in smaller groups here and there, smaller pockets of the protesters, and
They feel passionately. They want to be heard.
the
They're
city
very
and the police
concerned about what
department,
happened, and they want to
Right.
listen, but
They
there's
su-
ways to do it.
right, supports that right to be heard, that right to send the message, but only in a lawful manner.
And
tonight-
let them stay out there for quite a long time tonight.
hours. At times interacting calmly and peacefully and rationally with police, at other times taunting police, and eventually throwing things at police. And that's when the line is crossed and the move is made and the crowd is physically broken up. The verbal requests to disperse had little effect on those who were determined to remain. Well, that's interesting to see traffic moving through. We hadn't seen that for a while. So
I'm surprised that street is even accessible.
I wonder if that traffic had been held at a barricade while that
And
operation
while
was
that was
happening,
happening.
and finally just let
They
through
let
and
them
no one
through.
else is. That's a guess.
Well, luckily it's a time of night, certainly, that there's not a lot of traffic out there Monday morning now.
As we've been saying all along, it's a school night.
It
it
is.
isn't really. There isn't school, but it's a Sunday night, so people are going back to work in the morning, those who can, and but it's at this time of night downtown is relatively deserted when there isn't something like this happening. So it looks like, again, the rolling barricade that police had established to move forward has gone a couple of blocks now and has stopped. It may well be that they're rounding up the last of the stragglers. They warned them they would be arrested. There's no way for us right now to get numbers on how many may have been arrested, except perhaps anecdotal evidence from our crews on the scene. But as you can see, they're a ways off. For their own safety, they're zoomed way in to bring you this look at what's happening. So in an 11 breaking news alert situation like this, where you're a breaking news leader, we're always going to bring you everything we can. We did not expect to be able to bring you the what appears to be the resolution of all this live as it unfolded, but it was an interesting thing to watch. Police having been very patient for literally for hours until the point that it reached what they considered a threshold of danger that was no longer tolerable from their point of view or from the point of view of the safety of the protesters. They didn't want anyone hurt on either side, and they decided at that point it was becoming likely, if there was in fact some gunfire happening from an unknown source.
We want to take another angle from one of our reporters who is north of here. He is on Castilla. Robbie Reynolds is there, so let's get his angle now.
So we're seeing the other side of the very same spot. We were showing it you looking north from the south. Now we're looking south from the north to this barricade that has stopped. And we were wondering if there were any protesters gathered on this side, and we can tell from this shot that there are not. Whether they're regrouping somewhere else, we don't know, but it's revealing to see this angle, the other side, if you will, and to know that there's not a large group, which explains why the police have stopped. It's interesting. I wonder if Robbie Reynolds, who's operating the camera, can hear us. And did we just switch now back to the south angle? We did. So now we're back south where we started.
No, this angle they were looking north.
Right. We
Yeah.
were south of the
Oh,
police
yes,
cars.
yes.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. I wondered if Robbie, if he could hear us, if he saw what happened. He can't hear us. Okay, we'll try to get in touch with him later. So we've got this covered now on both sides. It's at about Cimarron. The police rolling barricade that started at Rio Grande has stopped. We got a glimpse of the other side from our other camera position and saw that there are no protesters, no group there. This hasn't turned into another stalemate that's moved a few blocks north. They have dispersed, whether it's for good, we hope, just for everyone's safety, the police and the protesters. But it was interesting to watch that whole thing go down, Diane.
It was like, they're not stopping now. Police have made their decision to move everyone out of the street, and it took them about 5 minutes or less to get it to this point.
We're just going to stick with this for a little while longer just because it's late on a Sunday into a Monday morning. We all wanted there to be some peaceful resolution of this, to know that this volatile stalemate between police and protesters wasn't going to ignite into something dangerous for both sides. And we see that the way this played out, it did not.
Last night we saw the violence. We saw rocks thrown through the courthouse, rocks thrown at the police operations center, businesses impacted, the business owners watching right now hoping nothing happens to their buildings, the people who live in and around downtown Colorado Springs just hoping it comes to an end so that they're safe for the night.
Is this the end? We hope so. We don't know for sure, but it seems like there was nowhere for the all day long, and especially last night, the group would advance, police would push them back, and then they'd slowly advance again. And that tonight, they were allowed to come all the way down to the very edge of the police operations center for what would hope to be maybe a productive and certainly calm interaction between police and protesters. But then eventually, as we all saw live on 11 News, it changed, and the plan they must have put in place. They must work with year-round. If we get a situation like this, what do we do? How do we handle it? Mm-hmm. They probably trained for it in some way, and tonight they put it into use. I don't know what they'd call that maneuver, but it seems to have worked.
It moved people quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Right all off the front of the police operations center into the intersection there at Rio Grande, Nevada, and right to the north.
And it moved them quickly and made them, they couldn't just move north as a group when the officers were coming south from behind them. They had to disperse to the east and west, and immediately, the group would, I guess you could say, be cut in half.
Yes.
Half going one way, half the other. So they're no longer the force they were. It was just a way of sort of dispersing them physically when the verbal request didn't work.
Some of the traffic finally being able to get through again now.
It does look like more normal traffic, doesn't it?
But this is the angle or the intersection we're looking at right now is Cimarron, Nevada, and Colorado Springs.
And we are looking north from a position a block or so south of Nevada and Cimarron. That was really interesting to watch, and really a relief to see it not erupt into something far more dangerous. I'm watching, at the same time we have a Facebook Live going on the 11 News Facebook page, and the numbers were consistently 1,300 or so, and those numbers are slowly going down a little bit, so maybe people are thinking this is the end.
Well, it looks like some of the police vehicles that were part of the blockade are now moving off into other directions.
I'm guessing that must be
repositioning themselves.
That would have to be, I guess, the next strategy, Diane, is then they go to the east and the west and see if there are straggling groups of a few people here and a few people there that still maybe need a reminder that they're not supposed to be out here.
Well, we can hear
protesters, so here comes a group from somewhere. No? Maybe that was just the police. It sounded like a group of protesters, but maybe not.
Well, now the streets are open, it looks again.
It looks like, Diane, you hate to be overly optimistic, but it looks like we may have a peaceful resolution tonight to what's been a
very long day.
A very long day. That peaceful in the beginning and peaceful for the most part right up until the end, and then just a little out of control, and the police orchestrated the maneuver that they'd clearly been planning for and strategizing about. And it seemed to have worked without any injuries to anyone, from what we can tell, just from watching it as it unfolded. That's not definitive, of course.
Okay, so I think we can wrap it up now, finally. Looks like things are much different, much calmer now in downtown Colorado Springs. Of course, our crews are going to continue to stay out there all night. We have 11 News this morning coming up at 4:30 this morning.
a.m.
It's a little late now, Don.
So I think we're going to leave it there. We were happy to be able to bring you that as it happened. We were happier still to be able to see it happen without any what appeared to be major violence at all. A quick flare-up, a quick decisive maneuver by police to make things disperse. And it appears from now, there may be a few out there still, but it appears for now that for the safety of everyone, the crowds have left that area.
And really, that only took about start to finish, if I'm looking at the clock right, 30 minutes or so, Don, from the time that police started to move in and pushing people away from the front of their headquarters into the streets and out north, and then blocking them south. Like you said, that made sense that perhaps they were just kind of split in half. Hopefully, no injuries, hopefully few arrests, and hopefully this has come to an end peacefully tonight.
We'll leave it there. For Diane Derby, I'm Don Ward. Thank you for watching this 11 Breaking News Alert. Updates at kktv.com and on our Facebook page, and all the recaps and the very latest on 11 News this morning beginning at 4:30 a.m.
Good night.